All right. Greetings and welcome to a special Saturday episode of the Unnamed Bracketology podcast. My name is Kerry Miller, joined as always by my good friend Graham Dorn. Please excuse any bags under our eyes. We are exhausted. Even though I went to bed before that San Diego State game ended last night, I just needed to get in bed before 2 a.m. for once in my life. We're going to try and talk about what has happened in the last 24 hours that has impacted the bracket. There were a lot of great games last night. I think obviously highlighted by that Jaden Bradley game winner in the Big 12 semifinal, maybe less highlighted by Kansas's showing in the other Big 12 semifinal against Houston. But after all the smoke cleared, I was like, oh boy, let's go see what this does to the bracket. And like nothing. You texted me about moving UCLA ahead of St. Mary's after they upset Michigan State, which I was already planning on doing, and you know, a little confirmation bias there for me. But did anything else change for you? I did move Alabama down on my overall seed list, but they're still on the 4 line.
Yeah, that was the big thing I did was move Alabama down. I actually still had them ahead of Vanderbilt, but as we know, Vanderbilt just picked up a monstrous win. So I actually have moved Vanderbilt now further up the 4 line, potentially in line to get a 3 seed, maybe. But last night, really, not a whole lot changed for me. UCLA and St. Mary's, you know this. I was wrestling with those two before UCLA played Michigan State. I was thinking about making the move regardless because I've had a problem with St. Mary's really only having the Gonzaga win at home and nothing else that really screams tournament team. And because of that, a 7 seed just seems very high to me. So I was looking for anybody I could move ahead, and UCLA had a few of those big wins, equivalent to Gonzaga. This just is better than anything St. Mary's has picked up all year. That made that choice very easy for me. So really not a whole lot has changed. The main thing I was doing was just starting to look at some of those 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 seeds and trying to figure out how am I actually going to order these teams now that's the final version of this product.
Yeah, I still won't even do that until like late tonight or tomorrow morning when we're down to just 2 possible variables being the Ivy League and I guess the now the A10, possibly the American, but there's still a lot up in the air. I don't worry too much about those 12, 13 type of cut lines. But let's get into today's games. Obviously, the headliner being Florida getting pummeled by Vanderbilt. We'll tackle both sides of that as it pertains to possible seed line, cut line points, whatever the word I'm looking for there is. But you don't immediately drop Florida. They're still 4 overall. But now, if Houston beats Arizona tonight, does Houston become that 4th number 1? I think there is a pretty strong case for it.
Yeah, I think Houston, regardless of what UConn does in the Big East Championship, I think Houston is that last number 1 seed if they beat Arizona. I think we were all expecting Houston to grab that last 1 seed, and they were like, once they beat Arizona at home, that will be the confirmation we all needed. And then they didn't beat Arizona. So now that they get them on a neutral court, I think it's really kind of the same thing. That will be the one big win that we are looking for. And especially being on a neutral court will make it even more valuable. I think Houston, looking at the overall body of work, I think would be stronger than UConn because we've seen what UConn has done in Big East play, and it hasn't been pretty for the 2nd place Huskies. So Houston, 2nd place in the Big 12 with a Big 12 tournament championship. I think that's enough to get on that 1 line.
Breaking news out of the Big Ten: Mick Cronin already has a technical foul. Yeah, I don't think even if Houston loses and Connecticut wins, I don't think the committee would put Connecticut back ahead of Florida. But that's when the head-to-head tiebreaker in Madison Square Garden comes into play, and we'll see what things look like after that. I don't know. I don't think I'm going to move UConn up if that's the scenario. I think it's either Florida or Houston. That's kind of how I felt coming into the day. But there was that potential disaster scenario where both Houston and Florida kind of look hideous, and Connecticut looks dominant for a second time over St. John's, and then that could be that point of emphasis that the committee is looking for of, look, we do pay attention to all the games, and Connecticut looked the best last night. Yeah, they didn't look the best a week ago against Marquette, but I don't know. I think it's probably Florida or Houston, and Connecticut's really honestly Connecticut's hoping to stay at 6 overall so they can go in the East with Duke. Because if Duke's 1 overall, Connecticut can't go to the East if they're 5 overall, which is a weird little bracketing principle that only us nerds really know about. But flip side of that SEC game, though, now Vanderbilt has been on a tear. Obviously, they started the season 16-0, didn't do a whole lot in that first 16 games, but ended the regular season with a road win over Tennessee, which kind of felt like the tiebreaker between those teams. Then they beat Tennessee again on a neutral, absolutely now ahead of Tennessee. And then today stomped Florida. I already had them at 13 overall. I was torn between Vanderbilt and Virginia for my top 4 seed, and thought if Duke lost to Virginia, that could open the door for the Cavaliers to knock maybe Nebraska from the 3 line onto the 4 line. But you told me that thinking that Vanderbilt might be a 3 seed is a hot take. Where do you have Vanderbilt now? If you've scrubbed that part yet?
I still have them behind Virginia. I think Virginia is a 4-loss team. I do think that's significant. If you look at the quad 1 and quad 2 records, still win percentage wise leans towards Virginia. Now Vanderbilt does have a significant win. I think it's one of those where it's kind of going to work itself out. I think if Virginia beats Duke, I think that will be enough to move up to that 3 seed in front of Nebraska. And as far as Vanderbilt, they've already gotten the big win. They can't match what Virginia's going to do big win wise from here on out. So I feel like it's Virginia getting the 3 seed if they can beat Duke. And then if they lose and Vanderbilt wins, maybe there's an argument for a 3 seed. But I was uncomfortable enough with Vanderbilt being a 4 seed this week that I just have a hard time seeing them move all the way to the 3 line. Not saying it's impossible, not saying they can't do it. It just seems like a lot to do very late in selection week.
Yeah, I forget which Tennessee win it was before that you were like, I've got a hot take. I think Vanderbilt might be 16. I was like, oh, I'm already there. And so I think I've been a little bit ahead of the Commodores on you than you. They are now, I mean, they were already top 14 in every single metric to start the day. So I think that's the lowest they could possibly have been, was 14 overall. But Virginia is 7 in all the resume metrics. So that could be a test of how much does the predictive metrics weigh when you're talking about seeding as opposed to selection. But yeah, I think if Virginia loses to Duke, which boy they sure did 2 weeks ago, the most likely outcome is Vanderbilt as that last 3 seed, because they were 15 in the reveal. Granted, they lost 2 games since then, but they've picked up by far their 3 best wins of the season since then. We got to talk about the A10, St. Louis losing in crazy dramatic fashion to Dayton. Dramatic, controversial, however you want to phrase it. But now we've got that disaster scenario for the Atlantic 10 where it's probably just a second team in that league. I think it's going to be whoever wins that auto bid is going to take the spot that had been reserved as VCU's projected at-large bid. I was worried about that heading into the day. If St. Louis lost, I thought that made this a 2-bid league, exactly a 2-bid league, and I think at this point VCU's at-large bid is gone. I think they have to seal the deal with the automatic bid. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's a close call. I think it's one of those where let's see how they perform today. If their WOB score is high enough up, I think they're in pretty good territory there. I don't know. I'm really kind of not sold on the VC one. I haven't made a final decision either way. I just think that WOB score is probably going to be so high that the committee's going to have a hard time leaving them out in a year where they talk about how important it is because everybody plays different schedules and all of that. I still tend to think they're probably in, but it's going to be really close. The team I think is really in trouble is San Diego State because even though they're positive WAB right now, they're guaranteed to be negative WAB if they lose to Utah State. So I just think there's really nothing San Diego State can do other than have the selection committee say, hey, the Mountain West is a pretty good league. Let's put two in from that league.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of positive wob, there's Auburn at 44th, wins above bubble. And boy, for all the complaining we did earlier in the year about, oh, how are there 55-ish teams wins above bubble? Look where that cut line is exactly now, right at 46. Can't imagine that was massaged in any way, shape, or form, right? Oh my gosh. But yeah, VCU is at a 1.12 wob. If they were to lose today to St. Joseph's, that's probably a minus zero point 0.6. That brings them down to around that Auburn range. So yeah, I think if they lose today, they're out. If they win today and lose tomorrow, we find out how many contingency brackets the committee actually does. Because I'm with you, at that point, their WOB would be like a 1.5, and it'd be hard to justify leaving them out for, a neutral win over Dayton or a neutral loss to Dayton, which is a, borderline quad one result after today for the Flyers. They'll probably climb to some regard in the net, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's a two-bid A10, and it's up to these last two games to determine that for us. Any other seed line cutoffs that you want to get to? I know you've been texting the group about Miami and Louisville on the 6-7 lines.
Yeah, and that's the one that's interesting to me. And it's not that I like Miami's resume. I really don't like Miami's resume. I just hate Louisville's resume. And that's a tough one for me because I think the committee uh, they have so many reasons to say, well, Louisville, when they win by a ton, and they have 7 wins against quad one. You add those up, great efficiency, 7 wins versus quad one. That seems like a no brainer. But then when you see how many opportunities they've had, you just keep thinking, why do they lose them like all the time? Like, win one at some point against a tournament team. And they did at Miami. And this is what I'm really struggling with. Had Louisville not beaten Miami on the road and then lost this neutral court game, I'd feel pretty good about Miami over Louisville. But I don't really feel good about it because Louisville just won at Miami before losing the neutral court game to Miami. So it's almost like when did the committee stop this? You talked about, I didn't really change anything in the bracket. I think Miami was above Louisville going into yesterday. So the question is, does the committee say, let's go ahead and scrub Louisville ahead of Miami now that Miami lost bad to UVA? Or do they say, we already had Miami ahead and Miami just beat them 2 days ago? So are we really going to punish them for playing an extra game here at the end of the year? I tend to think it's going to be somebody besides Louisville there. I don't know if it's Miami. It could be Kentucky, who has some really good wins as well. I just think that particular spot on the bracket, 24th overall, is really interesting to me because I could see arguments for 3, 4, even 5 different teams there.
Yeah. I mean, God, for the entire season, we've been trying to figure out who deserves to be in that 23-24 range because it was like Villanova and Louisville and BYU for the longest time. It's just like, will any of you please just pick up a really good win so we feel good about you as a 6 seed? And I guess BYU finally did a little bit. And now they're like 23. I think they're clear of that group by a slight margin. But yeah, nobody ever cemented it for us. I should go back. Are we convinced St. Louis is a lock? I think they locked it up yesterday.
I won't say they're a lock. I expect them to be in the tournament. Their WAB is high enough that it would be shocking to miss on that alone. And then you add in the fact that their Q1 and Q2 records are very nice. I think that's going to be enough between those two things.
Are they 6-9? Very nice. Yeah. Anything else we got to get to? We want to talk about Howard or UMBC?
No, I'm just excited to kind of put some of this away behind us and just get the final bracket out. And you can't think about it anymore. And then there's some peace in that.
Are you worried that we've groupthinked our way into this too much? Like, we are way too close to each other on everything. And it's confirmation bias, but it's also terrifying.
We'll see. I mean, at the end of the day, I think we both know there's some areas of the bracket that are just going to be toss ups. I'm excited to see what the things I totally missed on were, because it will, help maybe inform next year's bracketing. But this happens every year, right? I'll be like, oh, look what happened with Louisville last year. And then maybe they'll put Louisville as 6 this year. And I'll be like, see, I shouldn't have paid any attention to that advice that the committee gave me the prior year, because they completely ignored it this year by letting Louisville lose all their important games in Quad 1A.
Well, what would we talk about next year if not what happened in Louisville the previous year? That's been our staple all season long for you, and Hawaii Pacific, of course. But I think that'll wrap us up. We'll get one more in tomorrow. I mean, we're not going to squeeze it in between the Big Ten title game and the selection show, but maybe after the early slate, and try and give a line by line look through what we think is going to happen, and then maybe we'll come through with a post mortem on Monday or Tuesday and probably cry a little bit about having a really good score and still ranking like 200th on the bracket matrix. But until next time, take